Are you ready to discover a hidden side of the King? Did you know Elvis Presley recorded numerous gospel songs that even die-hard fans might have missed? Number 12. I, John. Have you ever heard Elvis sing about the apocalypse? Deep in the vaults of Elvis Presley's extensive musical catalog lies a haunting rendition of I, John, a song based on the Book of Revelation that few fans have ever encountered. Recorded during an impromptu session in 1971, this rare gospel gem never made it onto an official album during the King's lifetime. The song features Elvis's voice at its most ethereal, accompanied only by sparse piano as he channels the biblical prophet, describing visions of the end times. Studio engineers present that day recall Elvis being in a particularly spiritual mood, having spent the previous evening reading scripture. He arrived at the studio before anyone else and was found sitting alone at the piano, working through the melody. When producer Felton Jarvis suggested they tape it, Elvis nodded silently and delivered the entire performance in a single take. The recording remained unreleased until the 1990s, when it appeared on a limited compilation of rarities. Even today, many Elvis collectors remain unaware of this hidden spiritual masterpiece, where the King's voice trembles with genuine religious fervor. The track emerged briefly on streaming platforms in 2018 before disappearing again, adding to its mystique among collectors who consider it among Elvis's most authentic gospel performances. Number 11. Known only to him. Did you know Elvis recorded a gospel song so personal he initially didn't want it released? Known only to him represents one of Elvis Presley's most intensely private spiritual moments, caught on tape. Recorded in 1967 during a period of deep personal reflection following the death of his beloved grandmother, this song speaks to the idea that some sufferings and joys are shared only between a person and God. Elvis encountered the song at a small church service. He attended incognito in Memphis and was so moved he asked for sheet music. What makes this recording particularly unusual is that Elvis played piano himself during the session, something he rarely did on official recordings. His piano playing, while not technically perfect, carries a raw emotional quality that professional session musicians might have smoothed over. According to Memphis Mafia member Marty Lacker, who was present at the recording, Elvis was visibly emotional throughout the performance, stopping twice before completing a full take. When finished, he reportedly said, "That one's not for the charts, boys. That one's between me and the Lord." The song eventually appeared on a compilation album released by RCA in 1972, but received minimal promotion and airplay. Music critic Dave Marsh later wrote that the recording revealed a vulnerability completely at odds with the carefully constructed public image of Elvis the Entertainer. Today, the song remains among his least-known gospel works, despite its extraordinary emotional depth. Number 10. Without Him. Ever wondered what Elvis sounded like when singing just for himself? Without Him captures Elvis in what he believed was a private moment. This rare recording happened during a 1966 session, when Elvis thought the tape machines were turned off. He sat at the piano after most of the crew had left for dinner break and began playing this gospel standard that had been a childhood favorite from his days attending the Assembly of God Church in Tupelo. What makes this recording special is its completely unadorned quality. No backup singers, no band, just Elvis and a piano that needed tuning. His voice cracks several times, and he mumbles some lyrics he can't quite remember. but the emotional sincerity renders it one of his most moving gospel performances. Studio engineer Al Pachucki had left a tape running to test some equipment and captured the entire impromptu performance. When Elvis later discovered the recording existed, he initially requested it be destroyed, considering it too rough and personal for release. Years later, after Elvis's death, Pachucki revealed the existence of the tape, and it was eventually included in a box set of rarities in 1999. Gospel music historian Charles Wolfe described it as perhaps the most authentic glimpse into Elvis's spiritual core we'll ever get. The recording quality is notably lower than his polished studio works, with background noise and even a brief moment where Elvis stops to answer a phone that rings off camera, making it feel more like eavesdropping on a private devotional moment. Number 9. Beautiful Isle of Somewhere. Did you know Elvis recorded a Victorian-era funeral hymn that almost nobody has heard? Beautiful Isle of Somewhere represents one of Elvis's most obscure gospel recordings, a 19th century hymn that was performed at President McKinley's funeral in 1901. Elvis cut this track in 1965 at the request of his mother's favorite cousin, who was gravely ill and had mentioned to Gladys's years earlier that she wanted this song performed at her funeral. When Elvis learned of the request, he quietly booked studio time on a Sunday morning when few people were around and recorded the song with minimal accompaniment. What makes this recording particularly unusual is Elvis's vocal approach. He sings in a higher, more formal style than his typical gospel performances, almost reminiscent of church soloists from the early 20th century. The song describes a heavenly paradise, somewhere beyond the blue where loved ones will be reunited. According to Red West, who was present that day, Elvis wasn't performing, he was praying through that song. The recording was never intended for commercial release and was pressed onto just a single copy that was played at the funeral. Decades later, a studio employee found the master tape misfiled under incorrect session dates and included it in a comprehensive box set release in 2010. The song has remained largely overlooked even by collectors, partly because it sounds so different from Elvis's usual style. Gospel music expert Anthony Hilbert once noted that this recording reveals an Elvis almost completely unknown to the public, reverent, restrained, and deeply connected to an older tradition of American sacred music. Number 8. Miracle of the Rosary. Have you ever heard Elvis sing a Catholic devotional? In one of his most surprising spiritual recordings, Elvis Presley, raised in the Pentecostal tradition, recorded Miracle of the Rosary, a song venerating a primarily Catholic devotional practice. This unexpected addition to Elvis's gospel repertoire came about through a chance encounter with Yo Gurram, Fred Karger, in 1971. Karger had written the song after his mother's recovery from serious illness, which she attributed to praying the rosary. When he managed to get the composition to Elvis through a mutual acquaintance, the king was immediately drawn to its melody, despite having little personal connection to Catholic traditions. What makes this recording particularly unusual is Elvis's careful attention to the theological content of a tradition outside his own faith background. He reportedly spent time learning about the significance of the rosary prayers before recording, wanting to approach the material respectfully. The song appeared on Elvis, now in 1972, but received minimal attention among the album's more commercial tracks. Even many devoted fans remain unaware of this interfaith moment in Elvis's musical journey. Father Edward O'Donnell, a priest from Memphis who had occasionally visited Graceland, later recalled his surprise upon hearing the recording. Elvis captured the reverence of the rosary tradition remarkably well for someone not raised in it. That speaks to his deep respect for all expressions of faith. The recording features a gentle organ accompaniment and subdued backing vocals, creating a cathedral-like atmosphere unlike anything else in Elvis's catalog. Religious music historian Don Cusick has called it perhaps the most ecumenical moment in popular music history of the era. Number 7. Eye of the Storm. Did Elvis actually write a gospel song himself? While Elvis Presley rarely received writing credits, Eye of the Storm represents one of his few genuine compositions, created during a stormy night at Graceland in 1973, when a tornado warning had been issued for Memphis. As thunder shook the mansion's windows, Elvis sat at his upstairs piano and began composing this meditation on finding divine peace amid life's tempests. According to Memphis Mafia member Billy Smith, who was present that night, Elvis was genuinely scared of that storm. He started playing to calm himself down, and this song just poured out of him. The lyrics, which Elvis scribbled on Graceland stationery, draw heavily on the biblical story of Jesus calming the storm on the Sea of Galilee, but with personal touches reflecting Elvis's own struggles with fame, which he often described as a kind of hurricane around him. The recording occurred the following week at his home studio with minimal production, just Elvis, piano, and subtle guitar accompaniment from Charlie Hodge. Elvis initially intended to include the song on his next gospel album, but ongoing contract disputes with RCA left it in the vault. The recording first emerged on a limited release collector's edition in 2001, with poor promotion ensuring that even many serious fans remain unaware of its existence. Music critic Gillian Garr later wrote that Eye of the Storm provides a rare glimpse into Elvis's own spiritual songwriting voice, unmediated by the commercial music machinery that usually surrounded him. The original handwritten lyrics, complete with Elvis's crossouts and revisions, sold at auction in 2018 for $87,000. Number 6. If That Isn't Love. Did you know Elvis recorded a gospel song that addresses his personal doubts about faith? If That Isn't Love stands as one of Elvis's most theologically nuanced gospel recordings, dealing with questions of worthiness and grace that reflected his own complicated relationship with religion. Recorded in 1973 during a period when Elvis was increasingly turning to spiritual books and conversations to combat his growing sense of isolation. This Dottie Rambo composition resonated deeply with him. What makes this recording particularly interesting is the backdrop against which it was created. The same week Elvis recorded it, he had been hospitalized briefly for his growing prescription drug issues, creating a stark contrast between his public gospel persona. According to session musician Bobby Wood, Elvis came into the studio straight from the hospital. He looked terrible, but when we started on that gospel number, something changed in him. It was like the song was his confession and his hope all at once. The recording features one of Elvis's most vulnerable vocal performances, with a notable catch in his voice during the line, "Sometimes I wonder what he ever saw in me." Unlike his more triumphant gospel recordings, this one carries a questioning quality that many find more relatable. Despite its emotional power, the song was buried as an album track on Elvis's 1973 release and received almost no attention compared to his secular hits from the same period. Gospel historian Bob Terrell noted that this recording shows Elvis wrestling with faith rather than simply proclaiming it, making it among his most honest spiritual statements. The master recording was nearly lost in a studio fire in 1979, with the tape suffering water damage that required extensive restoration before it could be included in later compilations. Number 5. The Twofold Flame. Have you heard the gospel song that Elvis recorded in two completely different styles? The Twofold Flame, a lesser-known composition by gospel writer Albert E. Brumley, famous for I'll Fly Away, holds the distinction of being the only song Elvis recorded in both a traditional gospel arrangement and an experimental fusion-style blending gospel with elements of Eastern spirituality that fascinated Elvis in his later years. The first version, recorded in 1966, follows the traditional Southern gospel quartet style, with the Jordanaires providing classic four-part harmony behind Elvis's straightforward, reverent delivery. But what makes this entry on our list truly unique is the 1972 re-recording created during a late-night session following Elvis's growing interest in diverse spiritual traditions. This second version incorporates sitar, tabla, drums, and mantric-style repetition in the background, vocals creating what Elvis called a universal prayer song. Session musician Glendy Harden recalled, Elvis had been reading books on comparative religion for months. He came in with this idea about blending the Christian message with some of the Eastern sounds he'd been listening to. Most of us thought he was nuts until we heard the playback. The experimental version remained unreleased until 2007, when it appeared on a limited compilation titled Spiritual Journeys. Even the original traditional recording received minimal attention, having been released only as a B-side to a Christmas single in 1967. Religious music scholar Archie Edwards described the second version as possibly the first genuine attempt at interfaith musical expression by a major American recording artist. Yet it remains virtually unknown even among serious Elvis aficionados. The master tape for the Eastern-influenced version was nearly discarded during a studio cleanup in the 1980s and was saved only because an attentive engineer recognized Elvis's voice on the unlabeled reel. Number 4. Somebody Bigger Than You and I. Did you know Elvis recorded a gospel duet with his father? Among Elvis's most obscure gospel recordings is this touching duet version of Somebody Bigger Than You and I, performed with his father, Vernon Presley. Recorded in 1960 during a private family gathering at Graceland rather than a proper studio session, this intimate performance was never intended for commercial release. The occasion was Vernon's 44th birthday, and Elvis's gift to his father was fulfilling Vernon's longtime dream of recording together. What makes this recording particularly special is its unpolished nature. Vernon was not a trained singer, and his voice wavers and breaks with emotion throughout the performance. Elvis can be heard gently coaching his father through the song, occasionally whispering cues about when to come in. The only accompaniment is Elvis himself on an out-of-tune upright piano that sat in Graceland's music room. Family friend and Memphis Mafia member Lamar Fike recalled, Vernon was nervous as a cat, but you could see how much it meant to both of them. Elvis treated that recording like it was more important than any gold record he ever got. The tape remained in Elvis's private collection until after his death, when Vernon allowed its inclusion in a memorial compilation in 1978. Sound quality issues have kept it off most digital releases, ensuring that even today many fans remain unaware of this touching father-son moment. Gospel music writer Bob Terrell noted the recording reveals a more tender dimension to Elvis's faith, not the king performing, but a son sharing spiritual heritage with his father. The unadorned quality of the recording, complete with family members' whispers and a dog barking in the background, makes it feel less like a performance and more like eavesdropping on a precious family moment centered around shared faith. Number 3. Jesus Walked That Lonesome Valley. Ever wondered what Elvis sounded like singing gospel, when he thought no one was listening. Jesus walked that lonesome valley, a traditional spiritual dating back to slave songs of the 19th century, was accidentally captured by Elvis's home recording system at Graceland in 1976. The recording occurred late one night when Elvis, suffering from insomnia and in a contemplative mood, went downstairs to his piano. Unknown to him, the recording equipment he often used to capture song ideas had been left on by a staff member earlier that day. What makes this recording extraordinary is its completely private nature. Elvis had no idea he was being recorded, resulting in one of his most authentic and naked performances. The song choice itself is revealing, focusing on Christ's solitary journey and suffering, themes that increasingly resonated with Elvis as he struggled with isolation despite his fame. The recording is just Elvis and piano, with moments where he stops singing altogether, seemingly lost in meditation. There are also brief snippets where he can be heard talking to himself at one point, saying simply, "Lord, I understand that valley." Elvis's cousin Billy Smith discovered the tape days later and mentioned it to Elvis, who initially wanted it erased, considering it too personal. He eventually relented, but insisted it never be released commercially during his lifetime. The recording first appeared on a documentary soundtrack in 1997, 20 years after his death, but its poor audio quality and minimal promotion have kept it largely unknown to casual fans. Elvis historian Peter Grolnick described it as possibly the most authentic glimpse into Elvis's personal relationship with spiritual music, a moment where he's singing purely for solace, with no thought of audience or performance. The tape runs out before the song concludes, leaving the performance eternally unfinished. Number 2. The Lily of the Valley. Did you know Elvis recorded a gospel song in tribute to his stillborn twin? One of Elvis's most deeply personal gospel recordings, The Lily of the Valley, was recorded privately on what would have been the 40th birthday of Jesse Garon Presley, Elvis's twin, who was delivered stillborn shortly before Elvis himself entered the world. Throughout his life, Elvis felt a profound connection to his lost brother, often speaking of feeling only half of a person. This 1975 recording was never intended for public consumption, but rather served as Elvis's private spiritual communion with his twin's memory. The hymn, which uses the biblical imagery of Christ as the lily of the valley, blooming in places of sorrow, held special significance for the Presley family. Gladys Presley had often told Elvis that lilies had bloomed unexpectedly near Jesse's unmarked grave the spring after his burial. Elvis arranged the song himself, creating a sparse setting with just piano and subtle organ in the background. What makes this recording particularly unusual is Elvis's vocal approach. He alternates between singing verses in his normal voice and then in a softer, higher register, creating what feels like a duet with an absent brother. Studio engineer Tom Brown, one of only 3 people present for the recording, recalled, "He asked us not to look at him during the performance. When he finished, his eyes were red, and he just said, 'That's for Jesse,' and walked out." The tape remained in Elvis's personal collection and wasn't discovered until a comprehensive catalog of his private recordings was conducted in 1998. Even today, the recording has only appeared on a limited Japanese release of rarities, making it virtually unknown to most fans. Music historian Colin Escott has called it possibly Elvis's most haunting gospel performance, a song delivered not to an audience, not even to God, but to the twin he never knew. Number 1. Had It Not Been. What would Elvis sound like singing gospel in a different language? Had It Not Been recorded in 1974, stands as the only gospel song Elvis ever attempted to record partially in Hebrew, reflecting his little-known fascination with Jewish mysticism and his friendship with Rabbi Yitzhak Homnick of Memphis. This obscure recording came about through Elvis's growing interest in comparative religion during the 1970s, with particular focus on Kabbalah and Jewish spiritual traditions. The song itself combines English verses about Christian salvation with a chorus adapted from traditional Jewish prayers of gratitude. What makes this recording particularly remarkable is Elvis's careful effort to master Hebrew pronunciation for the chorus, reportedly spending hours with Rabbi Homnick, learning the proper inflections and meanings. According to Memphis Mafia member Larry Geller, who introduced Elvis to many spiritual texts, Elvis believed deeply in the shared roots of Christianity and Judaism. This recording was his way of honoring both traditions that he saw as interconnected. The arrangement features traditional gospel piano alongside subtle Middle Eastern percussion and a shofar, traditional Jewish horn, during the bridge section. Elvis recorded the song late one night with a minimal crew and a Jewish musician from Memphis to ensure cultural authenticity. Though initially planned for inclusion on the spiritual album, the unusual nature of the recording caused RCA executives to shelve it, considering it too experimental for Elvis's mainstream audience. The master tape was misfiled for decades until archivists discovered it while preparing a comprehensive box set in 2012. Even then, legal complications regarding the adapted Hebrew prayers kept it from wide release, with only a brief excerpt appearing in a documentary about Elvis's spiritual journey. Rabbi Homnick, interviewed in his 90s, in 2018, remembered, "Elvis understood the universal language of faith better than many religious scholars I've known. That recording wasn't about showmanship, it was about genuine spiritual exploration." Would you recognize the voice of Elvis in these rare gospel treasures if you heard them without being told who was singing?